Welcome, friends. One of the aspects of this place that I currently live, one of the aspects of this YouTube channel is to tell stories. Stories that come from the people who visit here, from the wisdom that they bring, from their own stories, from their own traditions and cultures, their own medicine. The stories that come from me and from this land. And these stories are woven into the work that's done here, the work that's done on the land and with the land, and that the land does to us. The work that comes from the wise people, the teachers, the students, just the visitors, who bring their own medicine and their own magic to this place. And stories are a foundational aspect of who we are as humans. In many ways, there are moral guides and the foundations of everything that we've come to think of as religion or spirituality came from these stories. Stories that the land tells about itself and that the words themselves move through us. And a place that chose itself for me to share these stories was down here, where I'm sitting now, by the riverbank. Because it reminded me that as a young boy, a favourite television programme for children was called Tales from the Riverbank. And somehow this riverbank seemed to be the right place to tell these tales, sitting under this dappled light in the spring of these wonderful ash trees with the river just behind me. At the moment I can hear the nightingales calling, and goldfinches and greenfinches and warblers and sometimes kingfishers, and occasionally behind me otters. And it's a rich place. And one of the wonderful things about the river is it refreshes and renews and changes every time there's a flood, every time there's a drought. Itself, it brings its stories from up on the mountain, from up above, from the sky itself with the rain. And this is a place of movement, of building, of destruction, and is a perfect place to let this land tell the stories of itself through me, or sometimes through other people who will tell their stories here. And today we'll be telling the story, or I will be telling the story, or the land will be telling the story, perhaps the tree behind me will be telling the story of the sacred deer. The deer that once walked in the woods and the forests around here. Deer that may well come again if we pray enough and if we're good enough. I hope you enjoy the story and the many others that will follow this on this channel. If you have any thoughts about what this story provokes in you or brings up, or you wish to share anything that arises from the listening of this story, then please put them in the comments below. And of course, as is the way with YouTube, if you like this video, then please show your appreciation with that thumbs up symbol. Or if you like, subscribe to us for more of these stories if you do really like them. So anyway, for now, sit back and join some more tales from the riverbank. Welcome to the story of the sacred deer meat. This is a very, very old story. In fact, it's one of those foundational stories. A story that's so old that when it was first told around that first fire, the rocks themselves were young. They were still not covered in the long tail of years by lichen and moss. They were still sharp and jagged, not yet worn smooth by time, by wind, rain, and ice. It was a time before we had letters, before we had numbers to count the years, before we imprisoned these stories with bold white marks upon blank white pages of paper. It was a time when these stories had great meaning. And what sort of story is this? Well, first of all and most importantly, it's a story that chooses the time to be told and the person to tell it. I don't choose it, you don't choose it. The story will decide when the time is ripe and who shall hear it and when they shall hear it and why they need to hear it. And each word in this story has been finely sculpted by 10,000 tellers over the years. Each word a prayer, a meaning, an aspect of life and of a place and of a tale. That over the telling is a palimpsest, a work of art, a layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of meaning. So deep it's deeper than the earth itself. Now I first heard this story from a man named Kedar, a wise old owl from North Carolina, near those beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. And in turn, he heard it from a man sitting around a campfire somewhere in the high desert, surrounded by cold, hard stones and the call of coyotes. In turn, that man heard it from some shaman back in South America, and so on back. Each grandmother, each wise woman, each shaman, each wild man telling a story, telling it a bit different. Sometimes, no doubt, the birds told the story, or the jackals, perhaps the jaguars and the wolves, and we humans listened to it. And of course in those days we could listen, because all spoke the common tongue, a tongue in which the stones could talk to the grass, and the grass could talk to the sky, and the sky would talk to the owls. And through it all marked and walked that first child of the earth, the first two-leggeds, who understood that ancient common tongue, who spoke it fluently. And in that common tongue in which everything shared, they prayed and they cried together and they gave thanks and they understood that all needed to be in balance. And in those times our great first monuments were built, but all of those monuments were there to say thank you. That was our language, thank you, and sharing, and how can I help? For the tribe was important, and the tribe was more than just the humans who lived there, but it was all the animals and the plants and the stones and the bones of that land together. They were the tribes. Now these stories, these medicine stories, well, we have to mark certain things, or at least we can if we wish. We can mark where we enter the story, what was happening, where did we go after we entered the story. And if we leave the story before its ending, where did we leave? Where did we go? And did we pass into another story? And how did that story come to this story? And for those of us who Sit through to the end of the story, fully in it. When those last words have finished and all that remains is the crackle of the campfire round which you're sitting, or the silence of the room in which you are placed right now, whatever is left scattered on the floor, whatever old wisdom, whatever stones and old bones are lying in front of you, there is your medicine from this story. And as you look around you now, can you see those empty places? These are the places where the souls of those who are sitting with you, or perhaps from another fire or another lodge, will come and sit, perhaps of this time or in another time, out of time. And they will offer their medicine or ask for your medicine during this story. The spirits of the land will also join us, the ancestors, and they will take their seat and they will listen to the old words which they heard from their grandfathers 10,000 generations back. This is the magic and the wisdom of the medicine story. So as that woman said, that wild woman who once ran with wolves, are you ready to spill your blood on this story? Because the blood that is spilt, your blood, from that will be some of the answers and the wisdom from these words. If you heard a tap on the lodge door, if you saw the flames suddenly shift on the fire and a breath of cold wind passes between you, then perhaps the story has arrived. Let's welcome it in. At a place in the deep far south, where two continents meet and two oceans dance together, and 8 of the world's great wind systems spiral and conspire, there is a village, a good village, upon a hillside. It's a blessed place, or at least it was. It's surrounded by a giant forest of beautiful ancient oak trees, interspersed with giant grandfather stones, each speckled with lichens of time. Underfoot, the soil is deep and fertile, and from between those great grandfather stones, sweet water gushes in numerous springs. The people of that village were content and happy, and they knew the right way. And the right way was to give thanks, like the first people of the land. And in doing so, they erected great monuments of stone, prayer stones, tombs, often at the meeting point of water, air, and land. And there they prayed, and there they gave thanks. And even after the bodies passed, they gave them back to the land too, placing them lovingly in craftily, keenly cut graves into the living stone, where the bodies would be laid waiting for the vultures to take them back into the air so that the body parts will forever be spiraling. The story continues though, and as it did so, generation after generation in that village, thousands of moons upon thousands of moons, it came to pass that the people began to forget those ways. They drifted away, and the further they drifted away, the less they danced, the less they sang, the less they give thanks, the less they knew. Instead of sharing, they began to hide and to hoard and to tell lies and to move away from the straight, true path of knowledge that land had guided them on for so many countless years. Further and further, they gradually moved away from that, and in doing so, the springs, they noticed, began to dry in the summer. They flowed not so strongly, and so the people worried, and they hid water. The trees died, and as the trees died, the soil was taken away in the great east wind and became thinner. The people grew less, but still they hid more and shared less. They forgot to pray at the stones and to give thanks. They even stopped burying their bodies on the stones so that the vultures could take them. Instead, the predators came, and the land was no longer as clean. Even through, though, that long tale of years, those long forgetfulnesses, there were those that held true, those that lived on the margins, the wild people, the medicine women and men, the shamans. And they told the same story, that one day in a great east wind a child would be born, a child that would bring back those healthy, connected, true times to the village when all would have everything they needed and nobody needed to hide anymore. There were many false starts. Many children were born in great storms, and nothing came to pass, until one great storm blew from the east for 7 days and 7 nights, even plucking the hairs from the sheep and the goats that roamed on that hillside. People cowered. But one woman, on the final night of the storm, went into labour. And as was the tradition in that village, as she went into labour during an east wind, the warriors of the village stood round her roundhouse in an outward-facing circle, each man with a giant black dog. And inside of that circle were the grandmothers, praying and keening, and praying some more, and asking, please, will this prophecy finally come true? The storm grew in intensity. The wails and cries from inside the lodge deepened. And in a moment, all became still. And as the stillness descended upon the village, so that insistent cry of a newborn baby split the air. Everybody leaned forward, expectant, listening. But all they heard were the sounds of a crying infant, not yet ready to share the wisdom, the truth that was sown deep within its soul a long, long time ago. One by one the villagers got up and left. The warriors turned inward, bowed to the lodge, turned and went back to their lodges. The grandmothers dusted themselves down and went to greet the child inside. Over many moons that child grew. And as he reached the teenage years, he began to spend more and more time on the margins of the village, looking under bushes, looking into the cracks of darkness that lay between the old grandfather stones, looking for something that he didn't know what. And on one day, he came into a small clearing on the edge of that village, and against a wall of white rock covered by giant, ancient ivy, sat an old medicine man around his small fire, and he was telling stories to anyone who listened. The young man sat and listened to these ancient tales, and from that day forth, every spare moment he could get, he sat with the old man and listened to the tales and listened to the tales. Still the years passed, and the grasping grew, and the fear gnawed at the people's stomachs in the same way the hunger gnawed them inside too. The young boy became a young man, and still he listened. And one day, after a fitful, broken sleep, he decided to go to the old man and find some peace. And as he approached the clearing, the medicine man sitting under his bush of wild ivy was telling a tale. a tale of the sacred deer, and the audience was a line of birds sitting on a branch above his head, listening in rapt attention. With a truth greater than knowing, the young man discovered that this tale of the sacred deer was the missing link, that thing he'd been looking for in the dark places under bushes and between rocks. That when that deer was present here in this forest, all was good. He turned to the medicine man and said, "Grandfather, grandfather, let me seek the sacred deer. Let me bring these times back to the village. Let me help my people." The medicine man turned to him with the patience and kindness and wisdom of years and said, "Young man, first go down from this place and find the prayer stone that we once visited in the youth of our times here. When you reach it, clear it of the encircling brambles, and then see if something lies there for you." The young man left, went down to the prayer stone. Wrapping leather around his wrists and fingers, he pulled briar after briar after briar away from the stone, and after many hours the beautiful, smooth, triangular shape was revealed, with those 2 holes inside that were there for placing your hands, to pray with the stone, to connect with the ancestors that sat beneath it. As he moved closer, he looked down, and there upon the ground was a beautifully crafted bow of white olive wood, strung taut with the sinew of a deer. He moved closer to the stone and placed his cheek upon it, his hands into the holes, and listened, and prayed, and cried, and prayed, and cried some more. He stood back and listened even more deeply. And there, coming from seemingly the depths of the earth, was a voice made of granite and crystal, adamant in its strength. "Young man, if you wish to go on to this quest, you must now go to the lodge of your parents. There they have something for you. There is a gift, and there will be bitterness. Accept it if you will." The young man bowed to the prayer stone and thanked it, picked up the bow, turned upon his heel, and went down to the lodge of his parents. Inside the door, his mother and father were waiting for him. They knew the time had come, and they were crying. The young man looked down, and in his father's hands was a beautifully crafted arrow of white olive wood. His father gave his son the arrow and said, "Son, go well upon your quest. We believe in you." And they looked at each other and realized that they would never meet in this lifetime again should he go upon the quest. Without a word, he turned and left, and went back to the small fire under the shelf of rock beneath the ivy bush where the shaman sat and waited for him. "O grandfather medicine man, I have the bow and the arrow. I am now ready to go upon this journey." The medicine man smiled once more and said, "Son, before you do this, I want you first to climb this hill and find a cave, you will know the one, and sit there for 5 days and 4 nights. And there I want you to pray and ask what should be done in the search for the sacred deer." So the young man took the bow and arrow, and without another word climbed the hill, his legs being cut on the sharp briars along the forgotten paths that led to this ancient place. And there, on the crest overlooking the 2 continents and 2 oceans, was a small cave. And he knew it was the right cave, because the sand of its floor was made up of 10,000 generations of prayers. Into each grain of sand was an offering, a tear, a question, a grief, a love. Layer upon layer of prayer he sat upon and stayed there for the time allotted. And then on the final night, he got up and went to a small circle of stones he'd made and sat in it and waited for the sun to rise. And as the sun rose out of the utmost east, he stood up and threw his arms wide and said, "Mountain, mountain, tell me, what is my vision? What should I do?" There was a silence, but no ordinary silence, because in this silence was the possibility of everything, a silence that was full. And from next to him, a voice similar yet different to the prayer stone spoke words, ancient, resinous words, words of wood and knot and needle. He turned to the old pine that stood there at the entrance to the cave. The pine said, "Young man, you are ready. Your quest must begin. Turn to face the east and journey there until you can journey no longer, because somebody waits for you." The young man thanked the pine, turned upon his heel, and walked into the eternal spring, the land of hope, the land of blessings, the land of eternal flowers, and walked further and further to the edge of east, and then a little bit more, until he reached a great valley, the valley in which the sun itself sat at night, waiting to rise each morning. And there, upon a ledge in this golden valley, sat a raven blacker than the night. The young man looked up to the raven and said, "Raven, raven, please tell me where I can find the sacred deer." The raven turned its jet black eyes upon the young man and said, "Young man, I do not know where to find the sacred deer, but I do know this. We've been watching you, and we believe in you. Trust in yourself. And now turn to the south, because somebody is waiting for you." The young man thanked the raven, turned, and travelled into the eternal summer of the south. The further he travelled, the more the land dried, the grasses became dry, the flowers withered, full of hope, seed, and promise for the future. The days became longer, the night shorter, the moon paler. And there, when he could travel no further, when the land itself was completely dry, he stopped, and upon a rock sat a magnificent black she-wolf. He knelt before her, and she turned her great head and fixed him with intense yellow eyes, eyes that burned like the sun itself. "O she-wolf, O great she-wolf, can you please tell me where I can find the sacred deer?" The she-wolf panted softly, blinked those eyes, and said, "Young man, I do not know where to find the sacred deer, the one you seek. But I do know this. We've been watching you, and we believe in you. Go now into the west, because somebody's waiting for you there." The young man bowed before the she-wolf, turned and set off towards the everlasting autumn of the west. Day after day he walked, the land once more becoming green. The nights were now filled with dews, the nights were lengthening themselves, and the stars became brighter, the moon became brighter too. Still he went on and reached the edge of a great forest, a great golden forest, with countless leaves, burnished golden leaves falling into the rich litter of that forest. And he walked silently through it, the air redolent with mushroom, with leaf mould. And there, in a clearing in the golden forest, was a fox, a beautiful golden fox full of cunning and ancient wisdom. The young man went up to the fox and knelt beside him. The fox danced a little, turned, looked at the young man and said, "Yes." The young man cried, "Fox, dear fox, please tell me where I can find the sacred deer." The fox replied, "Young man, I do not know where to find the sacred deer, but I do know this: we have been watching you, and we believe in you. Turn now to the north. Believe in the vision that you were given. Believe in the intuition that you have. Believe in your actions." The young man thanked the golden fox and turned to the north and walked into the land of the eternal winter and snows. The green began to disappear, first beneath the white rime of frost, and then snow, and then deep drift. Still he walked on, through fields of ice and frozen rivers, until after what seemed like an age he reached a frozen waterfall. And there upon the edge of that frozen waterfall sat the great white eagle. The young man looked up at the eagle and said, "Oh, great Father Eagle, please tell me where I can find the sacred deer. I have searched the four corners, and I have found nothing." The eagle flew down and alighted easily next to him. "Young man," he said, opening his great wings, "go home now. Go home. Your quest is nearly done. See what awaits you there." The young man bowed before the eagle and turned and left the north and headed to the center, to his home. After many days, he reached the edge of the forest that surrounded his home. And as he walked through its green glades and flowing streams, he came upon the great open area near the middle. And on the edge of that area, in a sunshine shade of a fallen tree, stood the great white sacred deer. There, at the threshold, their eyes met, locked. Time stood still. They looked at each other, and with a sharp shock realized that they had agreed to meet at this very place and very time an age ago. Slowly, the young man reached behind him and began to draw his bow, and as he did so he knocked the arrow to the taut sinew and pulled it back. Still the deer looked at the young man looked at the deer. Even the forest was holding its breath. The arrow shot from the bow straight into the heart of the deer. The deer fell down in a heap. The young man dropped the bow and walked slowly towards the deer. Kneeling beside it, he laid his head upon the deer's neck and placed their hands on the trembling flank. He stayed with it, weeping and thanking the deer with all his heart for giving its life so that his village may once more thrive. He waited patiently, lovingly, until the spirit left the body of the sacred deer. Once it had done so, he stood up and made a sledge of birch poles. Then, quickly and efficiently, he dressed the deer into hide, skin, meat, sinew, bone and horn, placed it upon the sledge, and took it back into his village. As he entered the village, first the young men ran up to him and said, you have meat of the sacred deer, please can we have some?" The young man said, "Of course, take what you will, I have plenty for all." The young men took the meat and went to their fires to prepare it. He walked a little further, and the mothers and the children came running up, saying, "You have meat from the sacred deer, please may we take some?" "Of course, as much as you wish, there is plenty for all," he smiled. And they took the meat and went to their fires to prepare. As he came to the centre of the village, the old people, blessed with the patience of time, came forward slowly and said, "May we also share of the sacred deer?" "Of course," said the young man, "take what you wish, feast, feast." And so they did. And for 2 days and 2 nights the village feasted. There was laughter at first. But the young man in his lodge felt uneasy. He couldn't sleep. Something was not right. He tossed and turned. He thought about the instructions he'd been given. Did he follow everything correctly? What had he done? This was not the promise that he thought would happen. Standing up, he ran up to see the old medicine man by his small fire under the ivy bush and said, "Old grandfather, please tell me I have done everything I was asked." The medicine man smiled and said, "Sit down. Listen. Had you first brought me the meat, I would have taught you how to prepare it, to preserve it, to make it good for many months to come. I would have taught you how to prepare the leather to make shoes. I would have taught you how to prepare the fur for clothing and bedding, how to make tools from the horn and the bone and weapons, and how to create rope and string from the sinew. You would have been full and replete. And when you yourself were full and replete, then you would know. Then you would become the sacred deer." The young man stood up and thanked the medicine man and thought he knew, and went back to his lodge where he tried to sleep. But still it evaded him until he fell into a fitful dream, a powerful dream, in which he awoke. In the dream, or was it life? We don't really know, but it doesn't matter in these sorts of stories. But around that fire into which he awoke stood the she-wolf, the fox, the raven, and the white eagle. And he went up to them and said, "Thank you. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for trusting in me." There was a silence at first, and then slowly the eagle walked forward fully into the circle of warm light that the fire threw, and said, "Young man, please don't thank us with your words. Rather, do it with your actions. Let your life become your prayers. Let your path, your wisdom, become reality. In this way, we will know you understand." Finally, the young man did understand, and he thanked them, weeping. The eagle reached out its great wings, spread them over the young man, and said, "Go well, son. Go well."